My wife, who's also my coworker. When one of us is working, we often use ICQ because that's the program that we use on the platform. So I don't know if it's work related or not. She messages me. Sometimes she's like, "Hey, what are we doing for dinner?" Another time she's like, "Hey, can you run this report?"
Welcome back to Poutine Politics, Canadian issues served with cheese curds. My name's Adam.
My name's Mike.
And today we're going to talk about
the kids going back to school, particularly in Ontario. Only because it's our home province. I know that other provinces are putting out their own measures. I'm specifically going to talk about Ontario. Why? Because it's my kids going back to school.
Yes.
So I care more about this one than any other topic. So I'm sorry for all the rest of the province.
It's kind of a competition right now between Ontario and Alberta as to who has the worst plan. Like usual.
Well, no, it hasn't been the usual. Like before COVID, yes, but now, no.
Well, okay.
All right.
I don't know.
Right?
They were competing for who was bad.
Yeah, they really were. So to let everybody know, in case you're not aware, which I really don't know how you wouldn't be, but if you are going back to school in Ontario, most classes are going to be business as usual for all intents and purposes. They are putting a bit more money into the system. $230 million has been announced. That sounds like a big number, but when you calculate it out to like per student, it's nothing.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that it equates to like 70 cents a day per student, basically. Yeah.
So it's not that much money. I mean, it is a substantial portion, but it's not as much money as they removed from the education system. So
to give an idea, so the Toronto District School Board, their report they gave to the province said that in order to meet the guidelines that they felt they would need to meet for COVID-19 precautions and things like that, that just their school board alone would need $300 million.
Yeah. They want to do this, and I'm like, and the reason why I want to bring it up because I've seen a general underswell of people like, well, the kids should go back. Their education is in danger. There's also other things like, the kids will be fine. They're less likely to come down with it and to severely affect them, right? Which is all true. Kids are healthier when it comes to COVID than other places. I'm not going to argue with that point at all. It's better because it'll help boost the economy. That's another good reason why, because then parents can go back to work and pretty soon we can't just keep spending money forever and ever on people staying at home. Kids staying at home in order for their kids to go back to school. I understand your point. But as one governor was famous at pointing out, the COVID-19 is death. So everything is better than death.
Yeah.
Right? Every scenario is better than death. So when you look at it from a standpoint of what can or should be done, that you're gathering a group of people, and I'm tired of saying that they're kids. I'm ignoring that aspect of it because I don't care about the age.
Yeah.
You're gathering a group of people. Some of them aren't mandated masks, which is incredibly insane to me because those are the ones that are going to be socially close than the ones that are further apart, right?
Oh, of course.
When you look into that, then you have to understand that it's a problem.
There was something that I remember seeing, and now I've pulled the article up. So this is a study that was done by the Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So this is in South Korea. And based on studying and reporting that they did in regards to infections in households and things like that, children between the ages of 10 to 19, so you have to think, what's that, like grade 5 to the first couple of years of college or university, basically, are just as likely to transmit the virus as adults are. Whereas apparently children under the age of 10 are, which is funny because the children under the age of 10 are the ones that we talk about, like, well, they're the ones that are always like pushing each other around and can't keep their hands out of their faces and stuff like that. And yet this study from Korea says that children under the age of 10 were roughly half as likely to spread the virus as adults. And apparently that's consistent with studies from Europe and Asia.
Fine, fair enough. Even if they're half as likely, even if they're less likely to transmit, even if they're less likely to be contagious, it's not necessarily that I'm worried about a group of 10-year-olds.
Right.
Or a group 5-year-olds.
Yep.
It's that I'm worried about 20 to 30 kids in a classroom where it's not physically possible to separate them by 2 meters, like the recommendations, like they want to say. The math just doesn't work for them to be 2 meters apart. You can't do it. For a government that was so willing to put in online learning in Ontario, why is this so hard to then all of a sudden go, well, why don't we do online learning in this case? Why don't we have kids go to school for part days as an option? So let's first of all understand something, that as you increase the number of people kind of in space, it goes up. And keep in mind that they're all in the same school. So if one kid in grade 6 has it, they can still transmit it to a person in grade 1.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they're in the same school.
Yep.
They're people, so they can just transmit it. And this is where I get annoyed with media coverage about this.
Mm-hmm.
Is the media finally went to somebody who I've actually started to look at. His name is Ryan Imgrid. He's on Twitter. He is a biometric statistician that, basically breaks the numbers down for Ontario basically daily.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. He said, for instance, if as of Monday, August 3rd, dating this, if you're at a dinner party with 10 people, there is a 0.3% chance that somebody with COVID-19 will have it. At a wedding of 250 people, the chance is 8%. How many kids are in a school?
Yeah, well, it depends on the school, right? I mean, like I know the elementary school, when my son was in elementary school, they had like somewhere between 300 to 400 kids in the school. But then when you think about high school, a high school will have anywhere from like 700 to, down in Toronto, probably something like 12 or 1,500, I think, right?
So I look at elementary, there's probably, we can say, and based on the trend, and I do look at the trends, and I try to look at the trends from the standpoint of not how many tests we do. I don't look at the trends based on how many deaths we've had, which is tragic and unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I look at where can we find the input, because the input is the biggest measure. Mm-hmm. It's always the best measurement. So I look at how many confirmed cases we have in Canada, for instance, and I look at it per million, not how many cases confirmed. I look at it per million because then it's a good representation versus other places, right? How are we doing versus the US? How are we doing versus Mexico, for instance? US is around 200 cases per million, which is why it's terrible in the US. Mexico is just going straight up. It's now around 50. We've been high. We've been around 50 before, but we were around 10, and then we went up to about 15, and then we're back down around 13 and 14, which is good. But with that being said, in Ontario, if there's a 250 people, there's an 8% chance. Well, that's probably going to stay around. So in elementary school, there's an 8% chance that a kid in that school has COVID-19.
Yeah.
In high school, if we look at 1,000 people as the average, there's a 28% chance. So let's give us the benefit of the doubt. Let's say it's 5% for elementary and a 25% for high schools.
Yep.
And they're sending them back.
Yep.
Are you for real?
Because the problem is that the decisions that are not being, unfortunately, the decision is not being made because of overall health. And that's the problem.
And where I get into the media coverage about this is because they actually interviewed this guy on CBC, because he's now become one of the people that they trust.
Right.
Because like people are like, well, I'm getting a news source from somebody who's actually, I don't know, doing the right thing. And so they had him on. He talked about how the fact like this isn't realistic. Like I've done the math on trying to figure out how to put the most students in. You just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't physically space them out.
Mm-hmm.
And he says like, well, what needs to happen? They're like, well, you need to have class sizes at around 15. One of the best ways to do it is to have alternating days or hire more teachers, which, is way more costly than doing alternate days, or having more virtual online learning. The questions that I had, well, okay, that's great. And then all of a sudden they went to a panel, or they went to online questions to find stuff out.
Oh, no. Let me guess. The online questions were just full of...
But they just weren't good questions.
Okay.
They weren't good quality questions. And the reality is that if you're trying to give news, then you should be looking at trying to give the best possible question. and trying to get the best possible news source, not answering some random person's question. Like, I don't care what Billy Joel has to say. Not because Billy Joel might not be consensus of the majority, but the majority of people can be wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong. And I consider myself an informed person. So if I was wrong about how COVID-19 would work out in the long term, most of the people that are around would probably be in the same position. Like, asking people in general, like, let's poll the audience. Why are you polling the audience?
Right.
Why are you doing this? Unless it's the consensus.
Well, I mean, even still, depending on the audience, it's, the average person is quite uninformed. I wouldn't say grossly uninformed, but quite uninformed, right?
So many people have turned against the news media, we'll say.
Yeah.
Because of various reasons. Either they don't like it because it's boring, or they don't like it because it doesn't inform them.
Well, and the media, like, they're not doing themselves any favors with a lot of the coverage that's going on right now, because really they're getting hate from everybody now.
Yeah.
Right? And some people will be like, well, that's exactly how the media should be. And I mean, on the one hand, I'm kind of on that side. Like, yeah, if everybody hates the media, then they're probably doing something right. But this isn't like polite disagreements over wine and cheese. This is like death threat kind of anger, right? And it's like, yeah, I don't know. The whole in the public interest is not there the way it used to be, I guess. Okay, so let's get back to the school. Let's get back to the school situation then. So,
yes. If they open the schools back the way they are, I have an immunocompromised person in my household. So the idea of sending my family back to school when they could come back and potentially harm somebody, not by their own, like, not by doing anything wrong, but because of a politician's decision for political reasons, upsets me greatly.
Yep.
Because there's no need, right?
Well, and I mean, obviously in the lower grades, doing online schooling can be a lot more difficult. And this is where I said, like, the decisions are unfortunately being made by the politicians as opposed to the healthcare professionals. The healthcare professionals are providing the information, but that's not necessarily getting disseminated into the decisions that are being made that are going to affect everybody. My view on this is that they want the schools open and essentially open status quo, because we need to make sure that people get back to work and that the economy doesn't collapse because people aren't getting back to work. It was announced earlier this week that the CERB was going to be getting phased out, and people were going to get transferred onto EI from the CERB. On the one hand, I think it makes sense. On the other hand, it could be, we'll see what happens, from a dollar's perspective. But then there's provincial governments that are like, well, no, we need these people to get back to work, and the only way we're going to get them back to work is if their kids go to school. And then people that have parents that have children are like, but we don't feel like it's safe for our kids to go back to school. So what choice are we going to have? It's either we send them and hope they don't get sick, or we keep them home and we're not working and we try and teach them, or hopefully there is some sort of online plan so that they can still get schooling done. Like even a half and half situation, where it's been discussed, okay, maybe kids will go to school one week and then they'll learn from home the next week, and they'll switch like that, right? So it's like they can do the half-size classes, but that's still a problem, because think about all the areas in this province where students are bused. Even if they're not bused, again, you have that situation where you have a child that is at home for a week of every two that's not old enough to take care of themselves, and daycare spaces are going to be full. They are going to be at a premium. It doesn't seem like any of those options of kids going back to school in person is going to work the way that they think it's going to work.
And I get the idea of the parents that are in a situation where daycare providers and things like that are at a premium. Now, for those listeners that aren't aware, there is no age requirement for looking after their kids at home.
No, yeah, that's true.
So it's important that people know that. So, and the reason I bring this up is because I've had many of a debate board where people are like, oh, well, no, these are the rules. I'm like, no, it's not Ontario. There's no rules for that. There is guidelines, certainly. And it's one of those things where sometimes it's kid, right? Like some kids at the age of like 5, they can look after themselves. Some kids at the age of 12, you don't want them looking after themselves at all, right?
Yeah.
But there's no set rules. The reality is that yes, it is impactful. Yes, it is going to hurt some people more than others. I'm well aware of that. And it's going to hurt the ones at a higher risk or the lower, the people that have the lowest amount of money coming into them. And I'm well aware of that. I understand that everyone's at risk, but like keep in mind that sending the kids back, you're asking for a disease that can kill people to be spread around.
Mm-hmm.
There was the case in Quebec where they opened up a few schools. Oh wow, a COVID outbreak happened. Shocking.
Yep. Well,
everywhere.
Look at the situation. Look at the situation with the daycare, the daycare centers in Ottawa, right? Like there was 3 or 4 daycare centers that had outbreaks as well. So I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah. And if anybody thinks like teaching is easy, go volunteer coach somewhere, and you quickly realize how good teachers are.
Oh yeah.
Like you only need to do that for a half hour or an hour, and then you realize how good teachers are at their job.
But Mike,
right?
Mike, teachers get like 3 months off a year. Like it's such an easy job. I mean, come on, look at all that vacation time they get.
Listen, I'm not denying you. Like the amount of work that goes into being a teacher to get to that point,
yeah,
is incredible. So yes, teachers at some point in time get a cushy job, but they've also put 12 years into that
or more. And let's put it this, I mean, unless a teacher is teaching the same grade for like 20 years straight, which I think is also pretty rare. There's always planning work that goes in, which doesn't just get done during the, you know, quote unquote planning time that they have during the day at school. You know,
yeah.
Like full disclosure, my dad was a teacher. I know how much work he put in after school hours at home, preparing lesson plans, preparing tests, preparing, like assignments and stuff like that. Like after dinner, like before dinner and after dinner at home, he was in the basement sitting at his desk, preparing for like the next day or the next week or whatever. And then in the summer, in the summer there was a bit less. But it's not like it was 10 weeks off. It was, okay, at some point, he had to ramp up and start getting lesson plans ready because September was coming. You can't just, you don't just hand stuff out to the kids and be like, okay, this is what we're doing, and it sorts itself out. You have to prepare it.
And I'll grant you that your father was like that, and there's probably lots of teachers like that. Just like, and a good way of comparing this is there's volunteer coaches out there. There are volunteer coaches out there that they show up at the time that they're supposed to. They do the thing they're supposed to for the hour or half hour they're there, and they go home and they don't think about coaching again for the entire week.
True.
Right?
Yep.
And they show up, and that's all they do. They just show up. Now, with teaching, it's a little bit different because you do have to meet a standard, which is why I say the bare minimum, you have to be 12 years. And the reason why I say 12 years is because you have so much time in schooling, you have so much time after schooling where you're learning or getting placement, and then you have another period where you're learning on how to do the thing you're doing, right?
Yep.
But much like volunteer coaching, you can take it at a very small level and you'll have minimal success. Whereas I take coaching very seriously, and I will spend 3 times as much time that I spend at the actual practice learning and figuring things out as best I can. So that way I come prepared as best I can, which is why my teams tend to grow more and the parents tend to like me more.
And you're not getting paid to do this either. So, I mean,
no, I hope that in our area, because our area is lower, that it doesn't spread and then we don't have anything.
Right.
I just can't see statistically how it's not going to blow up somewhere. And the reality is that is going to be Ford and Lychee's legacy. Like if this blows up and it blows up bad, that is their legacy.
Yep.
They have no one else to excuse from that. And for doing such a good job for so long to then listen to other people and have that influence them, the practical solution really is, and it's I don't understand, it's just to have alternating weeks or alternating days for the kids to go back to school.
Yeah.
It's the easiest because then you don't have, you just lower everything. And by lowering everything by half, it's not that you lower the percentages by half, you lower it maybe even more than half.
Oh yeah.
Like you can lower it by, like to go from, let's say 250 to 100, it's down to 3.3. right? Because you
Well,
just don't interact with as much people, right?
yeah. Well, that's okay. So, I think I looked up the article when you were talking about Ryan Imgrund. I think I found the article on CBC that you were kind of talking about. So they're showing, it's a chart based on July 31st and based on every region, like every healthcare region essentially in the province. And it shows like this is what these school regions are going to do, whether the kids are going to attend every day or whether they're going to attend alternate days, and like this is what chance of that someone in the class is going to have COVID-19. We'll use Windsor Essex as an example because Windsor Essex is an area that's been pretty hard hit, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is for secondary school age, and their plan apparently is alternate days. And so even as of July 31st, a class that has 9 people in it, and that's not students, that's people. So that's including teacher or if there's an EA or anything like that. Just a class size of 9 in Windsor Essex has a 5.3% chance that somebody has COVID. Like when you go to a class of 30, it's 16.6%. So I mean, when you if you go from a 30 size class to a 15 size class, like yeah, it's about a half. It cuts in half at least.
Yeah.
So
because that's how statistical analysis works, which is why I like this guy, because this guy actually does the stats that I would love to do that I don't have time for, but like much like myself, I can imagine he just loves doing the stats of this and cares so much that not only does he like the stats, he just wants to put it out there because he wants people to understand what's actually going on.
Yeah.
It's important that people understand, like, this is a huge problem and it's not going away. It's not going to, it's until we nip it, so to speak, it's going to be a problem. And I actually remember telling my former boss, like, I'm going to have to take certain days off at the beginning of September and the beginning of January simply because I'm going to get sick. And it's because I remember when the kids came back from school, they brought all these diseases home with them and they made me sick. And it was routine. Like, you could almost set your calendar to it. I was like, I can't help it. I know it's going to happen.
I like that thought of they're going to bring all these diseases home. Like, how the hell did I get yellow fever?
Right. Like yellow fever. No, it was priceless. Like, she's like, why do you look? Oh, kids went back to school, didn't they? I'm like, yeah, they did.
Yes, they did.
And that was it. And that was the only problem with it. So it's one of those things where the kids are going to do it. And that's just the reality of it. So yeah. It is what it is.
So the kids are going back to school. Maybe for a little while. We'll see what happens.
I honestly don't know if I can send my kids back.
Yeah.
It's just not worth the risk.
Right.
I don't think I'll be the only parent.
No. You definitely won't be.
I may even send them alternate days or something like that. Like, just, I'm making alternate days. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. I mean, you guys might be there every day, but my kids are going Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reality is I can see, unfortunately, I just don't see a statistical way that it's not going to happen. One of these schools is going to blow up. And when that happens, teachers and parents are going to freak.
Yeah.
Then it's going to change.
Yeah.
And that's the only way it's going to change.
Well,
but it will happen.
You know,
I hate that is a fact.
You know what will really cause it to change is if it's a school in Vaughan that it blows up in.
No, I don't think it'll matter.
I mean, so? I don't know. That's Leachy's writing.
No, I don't think he cares.
Oh, maybe not. I don't know. He cares a lot about his writing.
He might care about his writing, but like, it only takes one, and the teachers have fantastic union behind them. And if the teachers go, we're not teaching, what are they going to do?
Yeah, fair enough.
If they all say, no, we're not, this is insanity, I'm not risking it for my family or for these kids that I care so much about, which I would say, unlike any other job, teachers care more about their job than the average person's job.
All right. So I guess this has been the kids are going back to school with a question mark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm on the fence, and I understand the thought of not sending kids back. So, or where that some parents will have that feeling of, just it not being comfortable.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, anyways, my name's Adam.
Mine's Mike.
We'll talk to you soon.